for potentially someday civilization is Mars. That's the challenge. We put that before the people constantly through the station. The desert station, the Arctic station, it has been covered in press coverage amounting to hundreds of millions of readers and viewers. It's been in the New York Times, it's been on CNN, it's been in the Discovery Channel, it's been in all the major British newspapers, it's been in major French papers and German papers and Japanese television and Russian television and so forth and so on. And so this program, it's been successful. It needs to go on. It needs to be escalated in quality in order to increase the impression that it can. We have the rover challenge, which you just heard a little about. You're going to hear a lot more about tomorrow. Okay, this is a competition. It encourages college students to test their minds against the challenge of designing rovers that could be teleoperated to get scientific knowledge on Mars. We need to expand this contest. This year, it's like a dozen teams originally entered it. Somewhat less actually made it into the desert, but we want to make this into a much grander event involving not a dozen colleges, but scores of colleges. Okay, that is going to be a process. It's going to require work. It's going to require money, as the stations do. It's also, by the way, going to require some more help. Right now, Kevin Sloan has been running it virtually alone, and, by the way, deserves a great deal of thanks for that. But he needs some help if this is going to be expanded. There's just too much for one person to handle for this to be grown just by him. So, in fact, one thing that some of you might want to think of doing is approaching Kevin Sloan after this banquet here tonight and volunteer your services, because he wants to have a task force of at least 3 people helping him, because that's what's going to be needed to make this happen. And if you're willing to to put in some effort, you can help make this thing into a major national and international event. Teams have come from Poland and elsewhere, and that's what we want to do. We had a steering committee meeting a couple of nights ago. We decided on where the next conference is going to be. I'll tell you where it's going to be. It's going to be Dallas, the first weekend in August at the Embassy Suites Hotel. So you'll hear a lot more information about that, but I thought I'd get the word out immediately at this point. But we also have the current political situation that we have to deal with. Look, we have a horribly bad revision of the space program. I mean, the Griffin program was not, from our point of view, perfect. It was subject, it could have been improved a lot, like, for instance, making it scold Mars instead of the moon. But at least under the Griffin plan, we would have accomplished something in the current decade. We would have developed a heavy lift booster and a human capsule and a translunar injection stage, which could also be used to throw massive payloads to Mars. We would have come out of this decade, if not, we wouldn't be on Mars, but we would have in hand 2/3 of the primary flight hardware elements needed to send humans to Mars. Under the current plan, 10 years from now, if it's allowed to stand, we'll be no closer to sending humans to Mars than we are today, just as we today are no closer in terms of flight hardware developed to being able to send humans to Mars than we were into the year 2000 or 1990 or 1980 for that matter. Okay? The so-called technology development programs in isolation from a flight program never leads anywhere. We've had dozens of them over the past 30 years. Okay? And in virtually no respect has the NASA human flight hardware set advanced since the first shuttle flight in 1981, in no significant sense. They've had dozens of booster technology programs. We had Shuttle C, we had ALS, we had NLS, we had X-33 and VentureStar and the National Aerospace Plane Program and the Space Exploration Initiative and the Space Launch Initiative and the Space Lifter Program and whatever. They don't do anything. Okay, in the Apollo program, when we had committed to go to the moon, okay, in the second year of the program, 1962, they cut a contract to build a heavy lift vehicle. We flew it in 1967, and we were on the moon 2 years later. Okay, heavy lift. We can't go anywhere without heavy lift. Now, the one good thing about the Obama space proposal is that it was so bad that Congress refused to accept it. And not just the Republicans, the Democrats refused to accept it. They said, this is just no pasaran here, okay? This just ain't going to happen. They pushed back. They pushed back on the, well, I might say, by the way, that we had a significant role in this. We drew the line in the sand. As soon as that thing came out, they said, this is a path to nowhere. NASA needs a destination. We cannot have a space program that has no goal. Okay? We just can't do that. Okay? We cannot accept the idea of a space program which projects that for the next 10 years it will accomplish nothing at a cost of $100 billion. That's just the manned spaceflight program. For the robotic spaceflight program, they more or less were status quo, and they were going to continue doing the same sorts of things they had done before, and that's good. They screwed up the Mars Scout program a bit, but that wasn't the critical issue. The critical issue was the manned spaceflight program. Okay, we drew the line in the sand. Congress pushed back. The Senate, the full United States Senate, has now passed a bill insisting that the development of heavy lift go forward. Okay, right in the, I mean, this is a Senate with 59 Democrats in it. Okay, has passed an authorization bill that says the president's program for stopping NASA development of heavy lift will not be accepted. Okay, now the House has not done so. The House hasn't actually passed any NASA authorization bill yet. There is one that passed committee, and it does not include such funding. Okay, so the Senate bill, now the Senate bill isn't as good as what we want, but it's something. Okay, they're talking about a low-end heavy lift vehicle, 75 tons to LEO. Okay, but that's something. That, I mean, the largest lift capability we have now is 20 tons. 75 tons would represent a significant new capability. You could think of ways to design Mars missions, not optimal in my view, but you could think of ways with a vehicle of that type. And furthermore, it could be evolved to 100, 120 tons with time. So we got to support it. We got to mobilize. And in particular, okay, we don't need to mobilize on the Senate. They've passed it. We got to mobilize on the House. Okay, the House has not passed anything, and we got to meet with our congressmen, and we got to tell them to tell Nancy Pelosi, A, we want to pass a bill like the Senate, or if we pass a different bill like the Senate, we don't want you insisting upon this version, except the Senate version. The version has to include heavy lift. That's an absolute requirement. We don't go anywhere without heavy lift. And by the way, and that is more than anything else what is so pernicious about this business with the orbital fuel depots. Okay, you want to know why they didn't have orbital fuel depots in Apollo? Because you didn't need orbital fuel depots to go to the moon. If you really wanted to go to the moon, you don't go to the moon by launching 7 Titan IIIs and assembling things on orbit and refueling them at an orbital fuel depot. You build a heavy lift vehicle and you throw the astronauts and their ship to the moon, period, full stop. They were serious, that's how it was done. The orbital fuel depot is not a bona fide technology program. It is an excuse. It is to say we won't need heavy lift because if you had an orbital fuel depot, you wouldn't need it, and therefore it's a cover for not developing what we fundamentally need. Okay? So the issue here is not that it's a waste of money to spend on researching orbital fuel depots. They can waste any money they like. That's not the issue. The issue is that they propose to waste time. Okay, waste years, waste a decade. Okay, so we need to mobilize. Chapters need to be reactivated to go and meet with your congressmen in their home offices. They're going to be around. There's a recess. Okay, call them up. Say you want to meet with them. Go meet with them. Talk with them for a half hour. Okay, and tell them. Okay, our fundamental message has always been the American space program needs to have a goal, and the goal should be humans to Mars. But furthermore, right now we have something very concrete to tell them in terms of what they need to do, okay, which is get this funding passed for heavy lift, period. That's what we got to do. That's the challenge. If we could do that, we will have achieved something of enormous importance. It means that by mid-decade, this country will have, if not a Saturn V capability, a half Saturn V capability, something we will have fundamentally moved the needle in terms of making human space exploration beyond low Earth orbit possible. Okay? This organization has done other things in the past, I should point out. Okay? At our founding convention, we said, in addition to the Humans to Mars thing, we said the following. We said the Mars robotic program, the JPL program, needed to be doubled in scope. It was. And that made possible the noteworthy Mars robotic missions of this past decade, the rover missions, the Mars Odyssey, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. Okay? We also said that we wanted to have a Mars discovery program where missions could be competitively bid, so everything wouldn't necessarily come out of the JPL Central Committee, you know, and that the other ideas could come in. And lo and behold, that was implemented in the form of the Mars Scout program, this was called, and in fact the program was won by a Mars Society Steering Committee members, Peter Smith, and we heard some of the outstanding results of that this morning in terms of discovering in the north polar region of Mars environments that look like they're probably habitable for microbes, okay, places where we could actually look for life on Mars. This is the result of our work. Now, the Obama people want to shut down the Mars Scout program, and it could very well be, though this has not yet come up, that unless that the next step is to go after the actual mainstream Mars robotic exploration program itself, okay? Probably under the guise of shutting down missions that are within their own actual time horizon, but giving a promise for a spectacular Mars sample return mission where work can be started on as soon as they're out of office. We need to be prepared to push back on that. You don't accept the hamburger next year for a hamburger today, especially not in this business. Just like Sean O'Keefe, okay, you know, says, I've got this great mission to the moon and Mars. What are you worrying about me shutting down Hubble for? Okay? I mean, I'm giving you the moon. Can't you at least give me Hubble? Okay? We said no. Okay? And furthermore, if you're not willing to accept the risks of flying to Hubble, you're definitely not really flying to the moon. Okay? And we fought back on that. We were the first people outside of astronomers to say, no, this cannot be accepted. This is a betrayal of the fundamental mission of the America's space program. And it will disgrace NASA if it allows this, one of its absolutely proudest accomplishments, to be destroyed, okay, out of fundamentally cowardice of an administrator, an administrator who didn't want to take the responsibility for flying a mission that needed to be flown. Okay, the astronauts certainly were willing to do it. The astronauts were calling for it. The astronauts were leaking me all kinds of information that we could publish to disprove O'Keefe's statements that it was too unsafe to fly to Hubble. Too unsafe, even though we had done it 4 times before. But there you had that, and we won that. Now, so this is the sort of situation, this is the sort of responsibility we have. Okay, there's a vision that needs to be upheld, a torch that needs to be upheld. There are fights that need to be fought, including one we're going to have to fight this fall, and others that will unquestionably come up in the future. And then beyond that, okay, we're going to be moving into election season. Okay, there will be embryonic presidential campaigns forming next year, okay, which we're going to have to attempt to influence. We're going to have to attempt to get our ideas into those camps. Okay, it's the power of ideas that are going to do this. But even so, while our fundamental weapon is the power of